Welcome to another episode of Tell Me About Your Damn Book. I'm your host, Stephen Lomer, and my guest this week is a horror author with a number of short stories under his belt. He's just about to release his first novel, or he may already have, depending on when you're watching this. Please welcome Tony Tremblay.
Yay, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Excellent. You are the author of The Seeds of Nightmares, a collection of short stories from Crossroad Press that made the Bram Stoker Awards recommended reading list.
It did, yeah.
Your horror and noir-themed tales have been featured in anthologies, magazines, and websites on both sides of the Atlantic. You are also the host of the Taco Society Presents, a television show that featured New England-based horror and genre authors. In addition, you have worked as a reviewer of horror fiction for Cemetery Dance Magazine, Beware the Dark Magazine, and the Horror World website. You are also one of the founders of the horror convention known as NoCon, which is held September in Manchester, New Hampshire. You live with your wife in Goffstown, New Hampshire, a fictional version of which is often the setting of your tales. Yep. You have a son and a daughter and a granddaughter who is the cutest little girl in the whole world.
Bar none, absolutely.
Cutest little girl in the whole world? Okay.
Prettiest, cutest.
All right.
Love her to death.
Okay. I'm thinking there's a lot of grandparents out there, and that might be fighting.
They can fight me. They can fight me.
All right. Okay. I don't want to start anything. Just saying. That's all. Now, in my research, I discovered that you're technology averse.
Oh, yeah.
You don't own a smartphone.
No.
And you have yet to figure out your Amazon Fire Stick.
You know, I actually got it going, and I'm watching Netflix.
Okay.
But it cuts out on me. Every movie, I watch about a quarter to half the movie, and it cuts out.
Okay.
So I still can't. I can't even run the Fire Stick.
Okay. So. Where does this aversion, fear, confusion, whatever you want to call it, come from?
I don't know. It's funny because I am an engineer, mechanical engineer. It's not electrical, but
okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always had a problem with home electronics. But I loved computers. I was one of the first to get, I don't know if you remember the old Timex computers and then the Franklin computers.
Sure.
I bought those and learned to run those, and then I graduated to, finally I got an iMac. But when it comes to smartphones and sitting there and looking at them and putting all that time in, I can't do it. I get so confused. I say, you know what, it's not worth it.
Let's talk a little bit about NoCon. What is NoCon?
Oh boy, yeah. NoCon, it's we were talking, Scott Godswild and myself, about starting a convention that was pretty much a mirror of the old Anthocon convention that used to be held in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Okay.
And Anthocon was just a group of people getting together, talking, having a good time. Wasn't very formal, but they did make some presentations. They had some panels that they did. And when Anthocon stopped, we all kind of missed it. It's that camaraderie, friendship.
Yep.
And Scott and I were talking about it, and we said, let's have another one. Let's try it on our own. It'll be a non-convention. That's where the NoCon comes from, no convention. Oh,
I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I get it now.
Yeah. And we picked Manchester, New Hampshire, a place that's right off the highway to get to. It's La Quinta Inn is the hotel that's connected to the convention center. It's September 15th. But we got to talking about it, and John McLevine started giving us all these suggestions, and we said, you know what, John, why don't you become part of the group? So the three of us are putting together NoCon. Since it is kind of casual, laid back, we're only having about 90 people come to it.
Okay.
If it really takes off, if all 90 people show up, we'll probably do something more formal in the future.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. What are some other cons that you attend or are a fan of?
Oh, NeCon is probably the highlight of my life. NeCon is this year. It's July 19th, I believe. It goes for 4 days, and it's held in Bristol, Rhode Island. It's actually Portsmouth, Rhode Island, but Bristol is the next biggest town over. Okay. All the major authors go. Stephen King's been there.
Wow.
Peter Straub, you name it, they've been there. And it's just they call it a campers outing, a campers convention. And we don't camp. We don't have RVs. We don't have tents. We stay in a hotel. But it's that atmosphere, that camaraderie, and we're best of friends. We just have a great time.
Nice.
So
nice.
And we do have panels that's much more structured. And it's just a lot of fun. There's no other way to describe it.
Nice. Okay. Your author interview show, The Taco Society Presents,
Yeah.
just wrapped up after 51 episodes.
3 years, yeah.
What was that experience like?
Actually, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's kind of weird how the whole thing started out. I went down to a reading at a local establishment, and I listened to somebody read, and I got up and I did a little reading. Mm-hmm. And the local TV show station contacted me and said, "Hey, we have a guy that does readings on his show, and he wants to know if you'd like to come in and just read during his show." Mm-hmm. So I said, "Okay." I'm not quite sure how that would work, but I walked in and I got to talking to the owners of the station, and they said, "Geez, why don't you have your own show? I mean, you've got this background in horror.
Yeah.
You know all these people." I said, "Me, with a TV show?" And they said, yeah, we think you could do it. So I went out with a bunch of people and I started talking to them. I said, "Hey guys, look, I can't do this by myself. I'm too nervous and too chicken. But what if all of us," at the time it was Gardner, Philip, Sydney, and myself. Mm-hmm. Why don't we all get together and have a show together, mm-hmm. and do an interview type thing?" So I went back to the TV station. I said, "I'll do it, but it's got to be a group show," and they loved that idea. And 51 shows later, it was a success. It went really well.
Sure. Yeah. Why did you decide to end it?
It ran its course. It was time.
Okay.
I was tired. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of work.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, well, you would know. Yeah, and I would read the books. It's a lot of time that I didn't have anymore. And part of that is because of my writing.
Sure.
And NoCon, and there's a lot of things going on, and somebody said, "Hey, you went out on top." Well, I don't know how much on top we were, but we went out on a good note and we had a fun time. So I do miss it. I do miss the people, obviously, but it's time to move on.
Yeah. Okay. Good. You're a member of a hometown writers group called The Blank Page.
Yeah.
How does being part of that group help you as a writer?
Oh, tremendously.
Yeah.
I started out, I'm going to say 10 years. It's about 10 years ago. When I first joined the group, I did not write. I mean, I knew I wanted to write, and I have been writing, but I didn't know how bad I was. So I'd go to these meetings, and I'd submit my work, and they'd all kind of look at me. But that's how I learned. These guys were really good. And they took the time and they taught me how to basically write a story. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about function and prose and that type of thing. Even to this day, I still get my apostrophes screwed up. But I still love going to these meetings and sharing my work with them, and they do the same. Mm-hmm. And we've got some pretty successful people in this writing group. Bob Perot, I think, has written, or published rather, three different books. Sandy Bixler is coming out with her first romance book. So there's a lot of success in our writers group.
Nice. You previously wrote under the pseudonym T.T. Zuma.
Yeah.
Where did that name come from?
Well, the T.T. is Tony Tremblay. But the Zuma portion, I'm a huge Neil Young fan.
Okay.
Huge Neil Young fan, and he had a album called Zuma. And it was a takeoff on Zuma Beach in California.
Okay.
So what I did is when I had to come up with a name, because of work and a lot of other things, and what I write, I said, "Geez, I don't know if I want my customers to know who Tony Tremblay is." And he writes these awful stories.
Awful meaning scary and dark, but still written.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Let's clarify.
Thank you for qualifying
that. Let's clarify that. Still well written, not awful meaning awful, but awful meaning scary.
Scary. So I get nervous, and I said, I got to come up with a pseudonym. So I used that one, and after a while, when my customers did find out, they all loved it. They all thought it was great. And I said, shows you what I know. So I just dropped it. I just said, there's no sense in doing it. And it's funny because once I dropped it, Paul Tremblay also started to really come on his own. And so now I'm there, oh no. And I felt bad for Paul because I do not mean to jump on his success at all.
Right.
But that's the way it is. It wasn't planned. It just came out that way. And I love Paul. He's good. he'll always be a better writer than I am. And I just love his work, and I just feel bad about that. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to change it. It's my name.
Right.
So-
And TT Zuma is still out there if you ever...
I use it for nonfiction now.
Oh, yeah?
So if I do reviews or a series of articles for a website, I'll use TT Zuma.
Okay. Nice. I love it, by the way. It's a great name.
Thank you.
Where did TT Zuma's first story appear?
The first story appeared in the Horror World website. It was the wasn't the burial board. It was an Alabama Christmas. It started. I wrote that originally, and I sent it to the guy in Australia. I forget his name now. Of course, because I'm on camera.
Sure, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's tough to remember things on
It
camera.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
And he loved the story, and it was the last one he chose. And he emailed me back and said, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm going to pick a Tom Piccirilli story over yours." And how could I argue with that?
Sure.
So I understood.
Yeah.
So I went to Nancy Kalanta, who ran the Horror World site, and I said, "Nancy, I really like this story. This publisher in Australia really liked it. What do you think?" And she said, "Tony, I'm buying it right now." And that was the first published one, and that wound up in the Seeds of Nightmares. But the first printed story was The Burial Board.
Oh. And what year was that?
Maybe 8 years ago.
Okay.
So what's
2010?
2010. Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be about 2010. Yeah.
Okay.
Eulogies is something. Eulogies too. I do have a. That's Dong Sum and it's the weird story that's in there, but I can never remember the name of it. I'm terrible. My memory's going, but that's the one I'm editor of also with Nancy Kalante and Chris Jones. We did 2 eulogies anthologies.
Okay.
So and what's interesting about that is I sent the story in. Dong Sung, I'm going to get it before this interview's over.
Okay.
But I sent the story in and they accepted it. They bought it. And then they said, "Hey, would you mind being one of the editors in the story and help us out picking things, picking stories and getting it published?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely." So it's one of the rare occurrences where an anthology has a story by one of its editors in it.
Wow.
But that's how it came about.
Okay. Okay. Who are some of your horror heroes?
Oh boy, John McElveen.
Sure.
You know, I can't-
He's everybody's hero.
He's everybody's hero.
Yeah. Yeah.
My Chris Golden's also not only for his writing but for his work for the genre and what he does for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite writer is Jim Moore. I've been following Jim since Under the Oval Tree and Fireworks, his first novels. Always been a fan of Jim's. The one I probably respect the most would be Tom Piccirilli. I read him more than 10 years ago. I mean, I've been a fan of Tom's for a long time. But his work just hit me really hard. It's very visceral work, and if you like crime and horror, I mean, there's nobody better than Tom.
Wow. Okay.
So those are my heroes. Gerard Horner. There's so I could
So
go on
many,
and on. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, I understand. Have you ever written outside the horror genre?
Some noir, which is crime. The Old Man is would be considered noir. Oh, and the Scum Bar, which
The
is
Scum Bar?
The Scum Bar. It's a story. It's a Goffstown set story. That was printed in Tough Crime magazine. It's also noir. And that's maybe you could attribute some horror to it, but it was mostly noir.
Okay. Do any other genres besides horror and noir appeal to you?
It doesn't now. I mean, someday it might. John could talk about his Gone North and how he got outside the genre. But I don't have anything in my mind like John did that I need to write.
Okay. All right. Well, as you know, we have a gimmick on this show that we are contractually obligated to live up to. So, Tony Tremblay.
Tell me about your damn book.
It's called The Morehouse.
Okay.
And I'll tell you how that got its origins. I was a short story writer, Seeds and Nightmares, you mentioned that. And I've had a lot of short stories published in anthologies and magazines here and overseas, mostly England. And Jim Moore and Christopher Golden formed a group called the River City Writers.
Okay.
And what they did is they decided to put some classes together, seminars. And one of those seminars was called How to Write Better Fiction. So they were advertising for a while, and I kept debating whether to do it or not. And then Chris Chris emailed me and said, "Tony, would you be interested in going to the seminar?" And I said, I don't know. I don't have a lot of time because of the show and because of the writing. I said, but I think I can get something out of this. And he said, "Oh, great, because we really love to have you, and I think you can get something out of it." So I said, okay. So I signed up. Mm-hmm. What I didn't realize is that the fine print said you got to write 3,000 words and submit it, and then they'll take a look at it, we'll judge it, and then the next meeting, next class you write a little bit more. Mm-hmm. What I didn't realize is that it was for a novel. I thought it was short stories. So I read this and I panicked because I did not have a novel in mind. I had no idea what I was going to write. So Bracken McLeod, another excellent author, was having a book release party. And at the party, I ran into Jim Moore, one of the two people that ran the seminar, and he said, "Hey, let's go to dinner." So I went to dinner, and he said, "What are you going to bring?" And I said, "Jim, I got to confess, I have nothing. I don't know, and the class was in 2 weeks." And he said, "Tony, what did you always want to write?" I said, "I really always wanted to write about a haunted house." And he looked right at me and he said, "Tony, that's what you're going to write. You're going to write about a haunted house."
Wow.
And I said, I bet you I could make that work. He says, "You will." And that was it. He didn't make it, we talked about other things, but he got me to thinking. And I can remember going to Bracken's party, and as I'm listening to Bracken talk and read, all these ideas start coming in my head for the Moore House, because I decided I'm going to name this after Jim, because Jim is the one that gave me the idea.
Okay.
So the Moore House was inspired by literally Jim Moore, the author.
Wow.
Giving me an ultimatum. This is what you're going to write, period. I said, okay, all right, I'll do it. And that's how it started. That's where it got its genesis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Good. And what's next for you?
I'm working on a novel now. It's maybe a third complete. I'm a slow writer. It took me a year to write The Morehouse. It's called Do Not Weep for Me. That name could change, but it's about this young man whose wife died, and he's got a very young daughter. I don't know why I did that. Young daughter.
Young and small daughter.
Young and small daughter.
Young and small daughter. Okay, sure.
I think it's about 5 years old, and he's in the house, and she's out playing out back, and she gets kidnapped. And it's like, oh my God, what do we, it's the end of the world. I mean, really, it's somebody losing a kid.
Sure.
And at the same time, there's it's in Goffstown. There's a man that runs a local Goffstown newspaper who sees this, what he thinks is an elderly woman walking by his front of his newspaper office every day, with a limp, and her back is all messed up. And then one day she walks into the newspaper office, and he goes, "Oh, what can I do for you?" And she says, "My name is such and such, and I need to tell you about my life, but I need a favor from you first." And what happens is these two subplots wind up merging into one, and a lot of horrific stuff happens. And I can't tell you two more because that'll be spoiling.
Okay.
And I don't want to really spoil it because the twists in this they're numerous and they're close together.
Okay.
So,
all right. No, that's
if I
fine.
give too much more, but it doesn't turn out well for anybody in this book.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know coming in.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So we have a segment on the show called Questions from the Great Unwashed. They are social media questions that have been submitted for you. They're a mixed bag. You never know what you're going to get, so I will present them to you then do what you like with them.
Go ahead.
All right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Soggy from Connecticut says...
Soggy, I know who that is.
We all know who that is.
It is.
In Steel, you give a detailed description of the steel beast's breasts. In Morehouse, you have a pervert priest committing lewd acts with nuns, and the upcoming What It Means to Be a Woman, Vaginas Galore. How do you get through a public reading without blushing?
There's only one person I know who would know all that information.
We know who this is. Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Well, it's obvious you don't read from those sections. Although, as much as I'd want to, you just don't.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and
Fair enough.
just in case people are watching this and they're thinking, man, he's a pervert, he writes all this bad stuff. Those are only small parts of the book.
Jerry from New Hampshire asks, have you ever been mistaken for Steven Spielberg?
You can tell
it's a great unwatched. What can I tell you?
You know what happened? Yeah, I have been.
Really?
And what's funny is that we, after the Taco Society presents, we all go out for tacos and at a restaurant that's located close to Goffstown.
Okay.
And people used to tell me all the time I look like Steven Spielberg. And I never believed it. But we're sitting down one day, and this guy walks by the table, and he looks at me, and I'm kind of look back at him, and he says, I love your movies. And then he goes to the bathroom. And I'm looking at these guys, and I'm thinking, he must be talking about the Taco Society.
Sure,
You know, never dawning on me. And so, as we're talking about it, somebody says, no, you look like Steven Spielberg. And I said, come on. He goes, no, you do. And you know, that's what he's talking. He thinks you're Steven Spielberg. I go, in Goffstown, New Hampshire, Steven Spielberg, right? So we kind of laughed at it. As we get up to leave, the guy gets up from his table and leaves the same time we do. And so the guy says, you know, I just wanted to say again, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I really like your movies. Now, the guys I'm with are playing, they go, oh, didn't he do a great job with Jaws? And they go, yeah. And they go, how about E.T.? And I'm dying, and this guy's sucking it all up, and he's believing I'm Steven Spielberg. And I, finally shook the guy's hand and said thank you, and and he left thinking I was Steven Spielberg. So yeah,
that's tremendous.
Yes,
that's
really
tremendous.
Happened.
Great
really
question, Jerry from New Hampshire. Yeah. Thank you. Crispy Creamy asks, do you hide any secrets in your books that only a few people will find? That's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. The obvious answer would be yes, because I think every writer puts a little bit of themselves into every book they write, every story they write.
Yeah.
In the Morehouse, yeah, there's probably a few things only a few readers will understand.
Okay.
But it won't detract from the story.
Okay.
People may either smile or be aghast. We had to change one of the names of the characters because it got a little too uncomfortable.
Oh, I see. Okay. We'll leave that at that.
Yep.
Graham from Massachusetts asks, what's the most ridiculous fact you know?
Most ridiculous fact you know? Oh, man.
Graham, you really put him on the spot here.
Yeah, you really did. I think that a whale's penis is only this big. That might be it. Yeah, that's about it. I don't know any weird facts. That,
okay. All right. Yeah, so there you go, Graham. Whale genitalia.
Yeah.
And Frankie from New Hampshire asks, do you believe anyone can be a successful writer?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you've always wanted to be, you can do what I did. Go to a writer's group. Just keep plugging away, keep hammering away at it. Seek out other authors. Do whatever you can. Do whatever it takes to learn the craft. And anybody with talent, and you got to develop that talent if you don't already have it.
Right.
Can do very well.
Okay. Nice. And this is my question that I always wrap up every interview with.
I am married, and I'm very happily married. So.
Oh.
Okay. Yep.
No. It's 100 years in the future.
Okay.
A young person goes into a library.
Yep.
And approaches the librarian.
Yep.
And asks about Tony Tremblay.
Yep.
What does the librarian say about you?
Boy, but what I hope she says is he's the guy that wrote all those stories about Goffstown, New Hampshire. That's, I think, how I want my legacy to be. And people can judge for themselves whether it's good or not.
Sure.
But just to be known as someone that wrote a particular set of a series or a genre that comes to mind, I think that'd be fantastic. That'd be really nice.
Yeah, that'd be a fine legacy. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of Tell Me About Your Damn Book. I'd like to thank my guest, Tony Tremblay. The book is The Morehouse, and it will be available in July 2018 everywhere?
Just about everywhere. July 19th at NoCon,
Okay.
which will be in Bristol, Rhode Island. And then the 23rd of July, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. He'll probably do Apple. You can yell out anytime, John.
Wherever fine books are sold.
Wherever fine books are sold.
Yes.
That works for me. Yes, absolutely.
And the Haverhill House website, you'll be able to get it.
And the Haverhill House
Yes.
website. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. Cheers.